So here's the question: is the circle of fifths wrong? My point is that the circle of fifths is wrong in some way, and I'm going to demonstrate that for you, and why I think maybe it'd be better to put the circle of fifths in a different kind of light than we usually do. So, by the way, and I love the circle of fifths. It works. It's a beautiful thing. The presentation is somewhat geared for those who at least have some fundamental understanding of music theory, like basics, your scales, your keys. You have an understanding of what the circle of fifths is and that type of thing. So if you have that level of knowledge, then this presentation shouldn't be too hard. If you don't, some of this might be a little tricky to grasp, depending on where you're at. So before we talk about the circle of fifths specifically, this is actually all related essentially to the idea of modality, and Western diatonic modality. Often first taught, we learn the major scale usually, and most of us do, I should say, learn the major scale and the major mode by means of construction of our whole steps and half steps. So we learn our whole steps and half steps on the keyboard, and then we learn how to build major scales. Typically, that happens even before you learn key signatures. I presented you with a major scale. Now I'm going to back up a little bit and talk about the harmonic series. If you've played any instrument, especially played a brass instrument or woodwind instrument or whatever, the harmonic series is inherent to your playing because you learn the harmonic series, especially brass instruments, of how to play the instrument. One thing I do want to point out is that the overtone series is really important for understanding almost everything when it comes to music and music theory. And it doesn't matter whether it's Western or non-Western. The overtone series is a naturally occurring physical phenomena of sound, and also electromagnetism and any kind of wave property, periodic wave property. There's going to be essentially what we call this harmonic series. Okay, so this is really very important. And one thing I see a lot of music theory curricula and a lot of music theory texts gloss over, if they even touch it at all, is the whole aspect of the overtone series, and how the overtone series and the harmonic series, I should really say, how the harmonic series really governs more or less all of these kinds of principles. In the series, the first overtone or the second harmonic is going to be a doubling of the frequency. It's going to be the next tone, okay, the next pitch, okay. We use the letter names A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And so in this case, I've got a series built on C. So we're going to have C and then C, and then the next thing we get, so the tone that's 3 times the frequency of the fundamental is going to be this tone. Okay, this is the fifth, right? It's a perfect fifth in terms of intervals. And then we repeat, we get the fundamental again, now 2 octaves higher, and then this series continues, right? The second most populous piece of information is the next new piece of information we get outside of the fundamental, which is the fifth. Okay, so if you were to do a census essentially of all of the overtones from that fundamental, the first most populous tone in terms of frequency relationship is going to be the fundamental. The fundamental, and then all of the reiterations of that tone in successive octaves. Then we're going to get the fifth, right? So the fifth really is that relationship of the perfect fifth is really significant musically. It's significant timbrally. It's significant harmonically. And it's no accident that the circle of fifths is built the way that it is because of that relationship. Without getting into a whole bunch of history, long time ago, by many people, both Western and non-Western, recognized that importance of the fifth, and then use that as a way of potentially generating a pitch collection. and by the way, pitch space can be partitioned in any number of ways, and there are many different cultures that partition pitch space um, differently than Western music does. But if we think about partitioning pitch space in different ways, if we partition pitch space in terms of whole steps, we only get 6 before we repeat ourselves, right? If we do it in major or minor thirds, we're going to get 4, and then we repeat ourselves. Do it major thirds, we get 3, and we start repeating ourselves. If we do it in half steps, which is kind of a somewhat of an artificial kludge because of tuning, but nonetheless, I'm going to get there in a second. Well, then we get our 12. But how do we get there? Why do we have the half steps in the first place? And this is kind of where the harmonic series and the stacking of fifths comes in. Well, if we start stacking fifths, we get this. Now, if I start on the same tone that I used for my overtone series, we get essentially 12 different pitches. Now, those of you at home who, by the way, are microtonal folks, I understand about the syntactic comma. I know about all that. Let's just pretend for a moment, because Western music does, that we'll just fix that by means of equal tempering. Let's stick them inside the octave so that we can see this more carefully. So now we have the series of fifths compressed inside the octave, and my head's in the way. There we go. Stacking fifths, another view. Okay. Yes. And okay. And then we get back again. Okay, we get back to that C, okay. Now, interestingly enough, though, is that the first 7 of those is not major. It's a diatonic scale, but it's not major. It's Lydian, okay? The first 7 fifths gives us Lydian. Okay? And then the other 5 that make up the aggregate to get us our 12 notes is actually a C sharp major pentatonic scale. Okay, so that's also interesting because the pentatonic scales that act as complements to the diatonic scales are also different pentatonic modes. If you look at the way that the circle of fifths is constructed, the circle of fifths doesn't put Lydian with no sharps and no flats, by the way, because notice that, by the way, C Lydian has 1 sharp. It's a key of 1 sharp. It's F sharp. The circle of fifths feels wrong in this case, right? If you're really thinking about it from a holistic point of view, okay? All right, but before we get there, let's see what happens if we stack fourths. So if you've learned in your fundamentals that the inversion of a fifth is a fourth, right? And if we take a perfect fifth and we invert it, we're going to get a perfect fourth. We can do the same process by stacking perfect fourths. We get 12 of those before we get back home again. Okay, we get back to another C. So there's a stack of fourths starting on this C, going up. And then if we do the same process of putting them inside of the staff to make it easier to read, we get essentially this collection of fourths, okay? We get back again, okay? If I was to put those fourths into a scale, right? Put it in the scale order, I get another diatonic mode. Not major, not minor, but I get something called Locrian mode, okay? And that's not insignificant at all. And then if I continue the other 5, I get a C flat Phrygian pentatonic mode, okay, in terms of the complement, right? So every diatonic mode has a, every 7-note diatonic mode has a pentatonic complement that gives us the 12-note aggregate. This gets into the concept of inversion and reflection. If I invert Lydian, right, if I invert the Lydian scale, I actually get exactly what I just got before. I get Locrian. I get C Locrian. Here we have the modal reflections Okay, we have Lydian that reflects to Locrian, Ionian, which is major, that reflects to Phrygian, Mixolydian reflects to Aeolian, which is our natural minor. Dorian reflects upon itself. Dorian is a symmetrical mode in that sense. And then we have minor. Again, it flips back on itself. Okay. This is our traditional circle of fifths up here. Okay, this is the one that we learn in music class, fundamentals class, and music theory classes. We learn this. And C is at top with no sharps, no flats. That's C major, Ionian. I could also, we learned the minor one. We put A at the top, right? So we already actually do modal circles of fifths, just not really realizing that we're doing it, is because the Aeolian circle of fifths puts A at the top with no sharps and no flats, okay? And then that just runs the gambit. The pattern of fifths never changes. It's just where the top is. And if we always think of the top or 12 o'clock as being no sharps and no flats, well then you could put any pitch class up there and get a circle of fifths. So a corrected view. A corrected view actually rotates the circle of fifths. So if I go back, which I'd like to go back, just one there. If I go back here, if you turn the circle so that F is at the top, you get F Lydian at 12 o'clock, and then you get C Lydian at 1 o'clock with one sharp and so forth, right? You just turn it. I joke around with my students. I say that the circle of fifths in its prime form is stuck in daylight savings time, right? And if you go back 1 hour, fall back, we get standard time, right? So circle of fifths standard time puts F at the top. Circle of fifths daylight savings time puts C at the top. One thing that Lydian doesn't have, and one of the reasons why why Western music, tonal music, fell into the use of essentially Ionian major and Aeolian minor, but actually not really Aeolian minor, because we alter minor. My minor is played with all the time to basically get what we get in major, which is essentially the subdominant. In major mode, we have a polarity of fifths running outwards from the tonic, right? The modal center. We have a fifth up, which is its dominant, and we have a fifth down, which is the subdominant. In Lydian, we have the fifth up. We have a Lydian dominant, but we don't have a Lydian subdominant. We don't have a stable Lydian subdominant because F sharp is not stable in the key of C. C Lydian, if you will. The reason why Lydian is stable is because the subdominant doesn't exist in the same way. In tonal music, the pull of the progression, right, the move of tonal progression is often done in these downward fifths or upward fourths, okay? Basically, the tonic always wants to move to the subdominant, and then the subdominant wants to get pulled to the dominant. You can see my arrows are moving kind of in the circle of fifths. It runs counterclockwise in terms of chord progressions and also in terms of the ease of key areas. Anybody who's ever done chromatic as a composer, who's done chromatic modulation, or if you've taken classes in advanced music theory or music composition or whatever in terms of tonal music, it's real easy to go to any region that is in the subdominant, and it's a lot harder, it's a little heavier lift to support regions that are on the clockwise side, right? In other words, if you're borrowing from A major already destroys C major because the C sharp is there. Whereas anything in the subdominant region still contains the tonic until we wrap all the way around to B major, okay, which is in fact 8 fifths counterclockwise, okay, C flat major. That's why the subdominant is always pulling on the tonic, okay, and but that's why tonal music works. Tonal music works simply because of that. I'm trying to do contortionist routine here. Let me go to, yeah, this next slide also shows it as well. In these relationships, these fifth relationships. So the major mode, and I've just put the major mode up here. The minor mode has the same thing, except the minor mode, The minor mode, we alter the minor mode on purpose to duplicate a lot of these functions that we already have built into the major mode, into Ionian major. But this is kind of why the whole system works, and works as well as it does, and why it's been, if, like it or leave it, tonal music and the tonal system, the common practice system, works and has been used and is still used today. Pop music, a lot of pop music uses basically these same principles, um, because of this, because it works so well, because it has a satisfying harmonic and melodic, um, if you want to get a big PhD word for the day, teleological, which means goal-oriented flow. Is the circle of fifths wrong? Well, it's not wrong. Quite honestly, I'm not here to destroy the circle of fifths in so much as just to present the circle of fifths in a new light. All right, everybody. Have a wonderful and safe day, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.